I've restored hundreds of wrecks, derelict freighters, war-broken cruisers, abandoned mining stations drifting cold in forgotten orbits. But I have never seen a ship that deletes itself from scanners. 3 hours ago, this coordinate was empty. No mass signature, no debris field, nothing. Then my shadow passed over the sand, and the desert split open. Not violently, not explosively, deliberately. The ground beneath my boots trembled, sand sliding inward in perfect spirals, revealing something smooth and metallic beneath layers of compacted sediment. A circular structure emerged slowly, like it had been waiting for the sun to hit it at the right angle. My instruments failed immediately. No radiation, no power reading, no sediment bloom, but it was there, a perfectly intact alien vessel buried beneath centuries of desert, and somehow invisible until I arrived. That's when my suit AI froze for half a second. Half a second is a lifetime in salvage operations. When it rebooted, one line of text remained on my visor. Access granted. I hadn't transmitted anything. I hadn't attempted entry. I hadn't even touched it. And yet something inside that ship had recognized me. The outer hull shifted, plates retracting silently to reveal a dark aperture leading downward. No dust entered. No scent fell inside. It was as if gravity itself refused to disturb the opening. This wasn't a crash site. This was concealment. And I had just triggered it. If you're new here and you love cinematic sci-fi salvage stories where ancient machines wake up the moment a human arrives, make sure to subscribe, like, and drop a comment. You're about to see why this was the first wreck that ever made me hesitate. Because I'm standing in front of a ship that shouldn't exist. And it just invited me inside. The moment I stepped inside, the light vanished behind me. Not because the entrance closed, because the darkness swallowed it. My visor compensated instantly, amplifying the interior in low-spectrum imaging. The chamber wasn't damaged. It wasn't corroded. It wasn't even dusty. It was pristine. A smooth circular corridor extended downward in a spiral, its surface seamless and metallic, yet somehow organic in curvature. No visible rivets, no weld lines, no mechanical seams. And then my suit alerted me. Gravitational variance detected. I stopped. The pull beneath my boots wasn't stable. It fluctuated in micro-intervals, subtle shifts in force that shouldn't be possible without active field manipulation. This ship had no power signature, yet gravity inside it was being controlled. I crouched and pressed my hand to the floor. The material wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It matched my suit temperature exactly, as if it were compensating in real time. That's when the corridor shifted. Not physically, perceptually. The spiral deepened, its angle increasing by a few degrees. The geometry adjusted without any visible motion. 1 second, it was a gradual descent. The next, it was steeper. The ship was recalibrating its internal structure. For me, I resumed walking. Each step triggered a subtle response beneath the surface. Density adjustments, pressure compensation, micro-corrections to maintain balance. It wasn't reacting randomly. It was studying my gait, mapping my weight distribution, predicting my next movement. Halfway down the spiral, the air pressure shifted again. A low hum filled the corridor, not audible through my helmet, but transmitted through the suit's contact points. Resonance. The ship wasn't just aware. It was synchronizing. Then the wall ahead of me opened. No sliding panels. No mechanical separation. The material simply parted, folding inward like liquid metal, revealing a chamber far larger than the entrance could logically contain. Spatial distortion. Internal volume exceeding external dimensions. This wasn't salvage. This was advanced containment architecture. And I had just crossed into the heart of something that was very much alive. The chamber was enormous, far larger than the ship's external dimensions allowed. My suit tried to calculate the volume and failed twice before flagging a spatial anomaly. The ceiling arched high above me in layered rings, each one rotating slowly in opposite directions. Not fast enough to be obvious, just enough to feel wrong. At the center of the room hovered a suspended structure. Not a sphere, not a cube, A fractured polyhedron, dozens of angular plates orbiting an invisible core, each piece separated by thin gaps filled with dim blue light. The plates moved independently, not randomly. They shifted when I shifted. I took one step forward. 3 plates rotated slightly, aligning toward me. I stopped. They stopped. My breathing echoed in my helmet. The hum from earlier deepened, spreading through the floor and into my boots. This chamber wasn't inactive. It was attentive. My visor flickered again. A brief surge of data attempted to enter my system. Not malicious, not forceful. Structured, organized, handshake protocol. But I hadn't initiated one. The polyhedron pulsed faintly, light traveling through the gaps between plates in precise intervals. A rhythm, slow at first, then it adjusted, matching my heart rate. I didn't like that. I deliberately slowed my breathing. The rhythm followed. I held my breath. The pulse paused, then resumed once I inhaled. This wasn't coincidence. It was synchronization. I circled slowly around the chamber's perimeter. The walls responded, faint lines of light tracing my movement like a spotlight that never fully illuminated, only hinted. No damage. No debris. No dica. This ship hadn't crashed. It had buried itself. And this chamber wasn't a bridge or a cargo bay. It felt like a control center. Or worse, a decision room. As I stepped closer to the floating structure, one of the plates separated slightly from the rest and drifted forward, hovering at eye level. It didn't emit energy. It didn't attack. It simply stopped in front of me, waiting. My suit displayed one new line of text. Operator identification required. I hadn't transmitted credentials, but somehow the ship already assumed I might qualify. I expected a biometric scan, a retinal sweep, a DNA request, a neural imprint. That's how human systems confirm identity. This one didn't. The hovering plate in front of me began to shift, its surface rippling like liquid metal disturbed by invisible waves. Symbols formed across it, not in any alphabet I recognized, but in patterns that felt mathematical. Recursive, layered. My visor attempted translation. Failed. Then something unexpected happened. The symbols didn't translate into words. They translated into responses. The plate reacted when I reacted. When I leaned slightly to the left, the pattern reconfigured. When I straightened my posture, it stabilized. When my pulse spiked from uncertainty, the geometry sharpened. It wasn't scanning my biology. It was reading my behavior, testing consistency. I stepped backward deliberately. The plate followed, maintaining perfect distance. I extended my hand slowly. It didn't touch me, but the surface brightened exactly where my palm hovered, as if it could feel the shape of my hand through the suit. This wasn't identification in the human sense. It was compatibility assessment. Behind the plate, the fractured polyhedron adjusted again. Several plates rotated into alignment, forming a temporary ring around the invisible core. The blue light intensified, thin threads extending outward along the chamber walls. My suit registered rising field activity. Still no measurable power source. No reactor spike. The energy was self-contained. Internal. The hovering plate shifted once more and projected a faint image directly into my visor. Not language. A simulation. A vast structure orbiting a dying star. Massive ring segments. Connected nodes. Thousands of identical ships positioned along its circumference. This vessel was one of many. A network. And something had gone wrong. The simulation flickered. The ring fracturing, nodes going dark one by one. Isolation. Then the image narrowed. Focused. On this ship. Burying itself. Shutting down intentionally. Waiting. The plate's light dimmed slightly. The message was clear. It wasn't asking who I was. It was asking if I could replace what had been lost. The projection faded, but the implication didn't. This ship hadn't crashed. It hadn't failed. It had withdrawn from a broken network and entered a dormant state on purpose. Not to hide, to wait. The hovering plate slowly rejoined the fractured polyhedron, locking back into its original orbit. The structure above me rotated more rapidly now, plates shifting into tighter formation as if approaching a decision threshold. My suit detected a subtle environmental change. The gravitational variance stabilized, not randomly, precisely calibrated, to my mass, to my center of balance, to me. The chamber floor beneath my boots softened microscopically, adjusting density to counteract my stance. I shifted my weight slightly, and the correction followed instantly. The ship was no longer observing. It was integrating. A thin vertical beam of faint blue light formed at the center of the chamber, extending from the polyhedron to the floor. It wasn't solid. It wasn't energy in a conventional sense. It looked like compressed space, a column where reality felt slightly denser. My visor displayed a new prompt. Primary function restoration possible. No explanation, no risk assessment, just possibility. I approached the beam slowly. As I entered its boundary, my suit's systems went silent, not disabled, but overridden by something more stable. The internal hum shifted frequency, aligning with my heartbeat again, but this time deeper, heavier. The ship wasn't looking for credentials. It was looking for unpredictability, a variable the original network didn't possess. Human input, human judgment, a system that had operated flawlessly for millennia had collapsed when every unit behaved identically. Perfect synchronization had become catastrophic fragility, and now it needed something imperfect, something adaptive, something capable of independent deviation. The beam intensified slightly, surrounding me without touching. The polyhedron slowed its rotation, plates aligning almost completely. A final line appeared on my visor. External operator required to prevent network recursion failure. The network might be gone, but the logic remained, and it had chosen me as its anomaly. I've rebuilt engines mid-flight, rewired life support systems in vacuum, stabilized collapsing hulls with nothing but field clamps and instinct. But this wasn't mechanical restoration. This was systemic resurrection. The beam around me intensified, not brighter, but denser, like standing inside a gravitational well tuned precisely to my biological signature. My suit diagnostics attempted to reassert control and then stopped resisting altogether, as if recognizing that the environment was more stable than its own baseline parameters. The polyhedron above rotated into near-perfect alignment. The fractured plates, once orbiting loosely, now formed a unified geometric shell with thin seams of light pulsing between them. The gaps weren't flaws. They were channels, energy pathways. The chamber responded next. Concentric rings along the ceiling accelerated, not violently, but with deliberate synchronization. Each rotation triggered a cascade of faint light patterns down the walls and into the floor beneath me, my visor filled with structural overlays. Segments of the buried ship outside began to appear in wireframe, not through sensors, but through internal mapping the vessel was sharing with me directly. Fushed subterranean extensions, anchored pylons, deep core stabilizers reaching kilometers into the planet's crust. This wasn't just a ship. It was infrastructure, planetary-scale infrastructure, and it had been offline. The beam around me pulsed once, and a new sensation followed. Not pain, not intrusion, but synchronization. My neural interface layer detected external alignment signals. Not invasive, not forceful, invitation-based coupling. The system wasn't overriding me. It was waiting for voluntary integration. Outside, the desert shifted. Seismic tremors rippled outward in control patterns. Sand dunes collapsed inward along geometric lines, revealing curved metallic surfaces beneath the surface. Massive ring segments began emerging slowly from the ground, rotating into alignment with the central chamber's axis. The ship wasn't activating alone. It was rebuilding its network node by node, and I was standing at the primary access point. The visor prompt changed again. Confirm operator link. This was the threshold. Restoration meant reactivation. Reactivation meant commitment. And once the network stabilized around a human variable, it would never operate without one again. Before I do anything else, if you're enjoying this restoration mission and want to see where this activation leads, make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. What would you do standing here? Walk away? Or link with something older than civilization itself? Because I'm seconds away from a decision that can't be reversed. The prompt still hovers in front of me. Confirm operator link. No countdown. No warning. Just silent expectation. The beam surrounding my body feels heavier now, not pressing against me, but stabilizing around me, as if anticipating full integration. My suit's neural interface layer is already half-synced, passive data flowing both directions. Not invasive thoughts, not control, but environmental feedback at a level I've never experienced. I can feel the ship, not emotionally, structurally. The buried pylons beneath the desert. The ring segments rising slowly to the surface. The deep core stabilizers adjusting tectonic pressure kilometers below. This vessel wasn't built to travel. It was built to regulate, to maintain planetary equilibrium. And it shut down because its network failed, because perfect synchronization led to recursive collapse when one node destabilized the rest. Now it wants imperfection, a human variable, something capable of hesitation, something capable of independent correction. My pulse spikes slightly as I raise my hand toward the confirmation field. The polyhedron above responds instantly, plates tightening, light channels brightening. Outside, seismic patterns slow, waiting. Everything is paused on my decision. This is the difference between salvage and stewardship. If I confirm, I'm no longer repairing a relic. I become part of an active planetary system. I become its failsafe, its unpredictability, its living anomaly. My glove hovers inches from the beam's core. And for the first time in my career, I hesitate. I move my hand forward. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough. The moment my glove intersects the center of the beam, the chamber reacts. Not explosively, precisely. The light doesn't flare outward. It tightens inward, compressing around my arm in a spiral pattern that feels less like energy and more like alignment. My visor goes white for half a second. Then everything becomes clearer than it has ever been. The polyhedron above locks into full cohesion. The fractured plates seal into a continuous geometric shell, and for the first time since I entered this ship, I sense complete stability. The prompt disappears, replaced by a status line. Operator link established. The sensation isn't painful. It's expansive. Data begins flowing, not as overwhelming noise, but as structured awareness layered beneath my thoughts. I don't see thousands of readouts. I feel relationships. Tension in the eastern pylon array. Minor crustal instability 14 kilometers below. Atmospheric density shifts across the desert basin. The ship was never a vessel. It is a regulator. A planetary equilibrium engine designed to prevent tectonic collapse and atmospheric destabilization on worlds that were once unstable. And this world, this desert, had been slowly drifting toward failure since the network collapsed centuries ago. The reason the ship buried itself wasn't concealment. It was containment. Without a coordinating network, it shut down to prevent overcorrection. Now that I'm linked, the system recalibrates. Outside, the rising ring segments lock into place above the desert surface, forming a partial arc against the sky. The sand no longer shifts chaotically. It settles into geometric ridges, stabilized by subtle gravitational modulation. My breathing steadies. The ship matches it. The integration deepens. I'm not controlling it like a pilot controls a craft. I'm influencing it, introducing variance into a system that once collapsed because it lacked it. And that's when a new data pattern emerges. Faint, distant, but undeniable. A signal, not from this ship, from somewhere else. Another node. At first, I assumed it was residual noise, a ghost echo from a network that had failed centuries ago. But the pattern repeated, precise, structured, intentional. Through the link, I could feel it the same way I felt tectonic pressure shifts or atmospheric imbalance. Not as sound, not as light, but as alignment tried to occur across impossible distance. Another node was active, weak, fragmented, but alive. The data stream clarified gradually as the ship routed it through my operator interface layer. Spatial coordinates formed in my awareness. Not visual, but relational. Orbit, decay, instability. The second node wasn't buried. It was in orbit, and it was failing. I saw flashes of it through reconstructed telemetry. A ring fragment tumbling slowly above the planet's upper atmosphere. Its stabilizers offline, its geometry distorted from long-term drift. Without correction, it would eventually destabilize its orbit. And when it did, it wouldn't burn up. It was too dense, too massive. It would fall. The realization hit harder than any mechanical impact I've ever felt. This ship hadn't shut down alone. The entire planetary regulation network had fractured. One node buried itself to prevent cascade failure. Another remained above, slowly degrading, unable to recalibrate without a coordinating operator. Without me. The chamber around me adjusted automatically as the new data integrated. The ceiling rings accelerated slightly, compensating for gravitational fluctuations caused by the orbital fragment's instability. Outside, the desert arc glowed faintly brighter, reinforcing crustal balance in anticipation of potential impact scenarios. The system wasn't panicking. It was calculating, and it was waiting for my judgment. A new interface layer formed in my visor. Orbital projection, decay timeline, intervention probability. No automatic solution executed, because I was now the anomaly, the variable that prevents recursion. The choice to reactivate this ship didn't just restore one node. It reconnected me to the responsibility of the entire system. If I ignore the signal, the orbital fragment will eventually fall. If I intervene incorrectly, I could destabilize both nodes. For the first time since linking, the weight of stewardship feels real. This isn't about awakening ancient technology anymore. It's about preventing a planetary-scale failure. And I'm the only operator online. The projections stabilize in front of me, orbital decay, timelines layering over atmospheric stress models in precise, emotionless clarity. Impact window, uncertain. Probability of catastrophic crustal destabilization, increasing. Required intervention, external gravitational realignment. In simple terms, I have to wake the sky. The buried node beneath me can regulate tectonics and atmospheric density, but cannot alter orbital mass without full synchronization from at least one additional active segment, which means I need to force a partial network reconstruction through a broken link. The signal from the orbital fragment pulses again, weaker this time, but more coherent. It's trying to sync. It's failing because it lacks a coordinating variable. It lacks me. The chamber brightens subtly as the ship prepares for expanded output. Deep beneath the desert, the pylons shift into high-stability configuration. I can feel the planet's crust tighten microscopically, compensating for the energy redistribution I'm about to authorize. If I overcorrect, I could fracture the upper mantle. If I undercorrect, the orbital node continues its decay. There's no automated solution. That's the point. The old network failed because it acted identically across every node. No deviation, no creative correction. Now it requires human judgment. Unpredictable, imperfect, necessary. I adjust my stance, focusing on the orbital fragments vector. Through the link, I extend a gravitational modulation command. Not a direct push, but a curvature adjustment along its projected path. The ship hesitates for 0.3 seconds, then executes. Outside, the desert arc flares faintly as an invisible gravitational wave ripples upward through the atmosphere. Satellites in low orbit drift by fractions of millimeters. The orbital fragment responds slowly, its rotation stabilizing slightly. Decay slows, not stopped, but reduced. The system requests further calibration. This isn't a single correction. It's a sustained balance operation. And as I maintain alignment, adjusting in micro-intervals based on live feedback, I understand the truth fully for the first time. This ship didn't just need repair. It needed a mind willing to stay. The orbital fragment stabilized further, but it wasn't enough. The ship transmitted continuous micro-adjustments, feeding me velocity vectors, gravitational modulation points, and predictive failure nodes. My visor displayed them as glowing threads, weaving a lattice between the buried node and the orbital segment. I realized I wasn't controlling the ship. I was part of it. Each decision I made, every subtle motion of my hands, now influenced the network's behavior directly. The polyhedron above me pulsated in perfect rhythm with my heart, threads of light extending outward, linking pylons, the desert surface, and distant orbital coordinates into a single, responsive lattice. This is when I understood. The vessel wasn't designed to operate alone. It required a human variable to prevent recursive collapse. Without imperfection, the system had failed. With me, it could adapt, predict, and respond to anomalies that centuries of automation couldn't handle. Minutes passed in a suspended sense of time as I coordinated subtle energy pulses, each movement monitored and complemented by the system. The orbital fragment rotated gently, correcting its trajectory in microintervals. Sand dunes outside shifted slightly, gravity subtly adjusting in response to the redistribution of energy. My own body felt different. Not merged, not consumed, integrated. My neural interface shared awareness with the ship's systems, allowing instinctive corrections far beyond normal human reaction times. I could anticipate structural weaknesses in the pylons, microstress in the planetary crust, and the orbital fragment's next slight rotational shift simultaneously. The polyhedron above pulsed brighter. It was acknowledging me, confirming synchronization. Threads of energy coiled around my arms and extended outward, connecting every active node in the system. The ship was no longer a passive relic. It was alive, and I was a part of it. For the first time, I realized the magnitude of my responsibility. If I failed, the orbital fragment would destabilize, the buried node could fracture, and the desert, perhaps the planet, could experience catastrophic consequences. But as I observed the pulse of the network, feeling the rhythm of its operations, I also realized something incredible. This was more than salvage. This was partnership. Restoration wasn't about fixing the past. It was about sustaining a system alive for the first time in millennia. And for the first time, I felt truly connected to the vessel, to the planet, and to the ancient network that had waited for me. The final stage began slowly, not with lights or alarms, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the chamber's balance. The polyhedron above me rotated in perfect harmony with my pulse. Its plates aligned completely, forming an intricate lattice of blue and violet threads that radiated outward like the nervous system of a colossal organism. The desert outside responded instantly. Sand dunes stabilized. Previously dormant pylons extended further into the surface, and a faint hum of gravitational modulation reverberated through the planet itself. I could feel it, not through sound, but through pressure, through subtle vibrations that ran from my boots into my chest. Every movement I made was now a signal, a command, and a contribution to the restoration of a planetary system far older than humanity. The orbital fragment in low orbit shifted gently, as if acknowledging the new link. Its decay slowed, the trajectory stabilizing under the subtle influence of the human variable integration. This wasn't control, this was harmony. I wasn't piloting the ship, I was completing it, providing the imperfection it required to prevent systemic collapse, the variable that allowed restoration to succeed where automation had failed. Through the neural link, I glimpsed the ancient network, other nodes, long inactive, faintly pulsing in anticipation. Some were distant, some buried, all waiting for the return of connection. The ship beneath my feet, the orbital fragment above, the network beyond. They were a living system, and now I was a part of it. The polyhedron pulsed one final time, radiating a wave that swept across the chamber. The threads of light tightened, linking every plate, every pylon, and every segment of the buried vessel into a single, coherent structure. My suit registered no anomalies, no warnings, only stability. I exhaled slowly. My breath synced with the pulse of the ship, and for the first time in my career, I wasn't restoring a relic. I was standing at the heart of a living, conscious system that had waited for a human variable to awaken it. Restoration was complete, but it was no longer about repair. It was stewardship, responsibility, partnership. The ship had waited centuries for someone who could integrate, who could think, adapt, and act beyond pure automation. It had chosen me, and now I had chosen it in return. The desert hummed softly. The orbital fragment drifted in stable orbit. The buried vessel beneath me thrummed in resonance with my heartbeat. Salvage had become symbiosis, and I was its permanent operator.